by Zilpha Keatley Snyder is about a girl named Melanie who lives in the Casa Rosada and somewhere in California by a university, but they don't tell which university she lives by. A girl named April, around her same age, she moves into the Casa Rosada with her grandma Caroline because her mom is on tour with a band. She thinks it's going to be boring, but she and Melanie becomes friends, and April meets Melanie's brother Marshall, who's 4 years old. They finally have a passion for Egypt together. And Marshall's also interested in Egypt, but is more interested in the stuffed octopus security. They live on Orchard Avenue, and on that street, there's a store, an A to Z antique store owned by the professor, who all the kids call the professor, but no one knows his actual real name. He doesn't make any business because everyone's mostly kind of scared of him. And but to that store, the store was important to Melanie and April and a new girl named Elizabeth because they make this game called Egypt, and then a murder happens, and then they can't play the game, and two boys join in the game, and then one day when April is babysitting Marshall, someone tries to murder her or kidnap her, but then the professor saves her, and April is safe.
Thank you, Ms. Brock. Ms. Brock, you may deliver your position statement.
I think the book The Egypt Game should be banned for two reasons. For using the word Negro to describe the skin color of Marshall and Melanie, and for having violence and not being suitable for kids. For most people, the word Negro is offensive and is associated with slavery. I asked 10 people, is the word Negro offensive, and 9 out of 10 people said yes. The book was written in 1967 during the American Civil Rights Movement, so it was questionable whether to use the word Black, Negro, or African American, but the author should have realized that African American should have been the best fit. The book was also challenged for depicting Egyptian rituals, but in this blog paragraph, the girl who writes it said there are more serious things that should be challenged. Let me read it. Plus, if this book were to be seriously challenged, there are worse things to ban it for than Egyptian ceremonies. For instance, there is the murder of a child, the abandonment of a child by her mother.
Ms. Anderson, you may now deliver your position statement.
The Egypt Game should not be banned. I think that the Egypt Game teaches us about Egyptian culture, rituals, and sacrifices. I thought that their culture is very interesting and fun to read about. I also think it's good to be educated about different cultures. I found that it was really cool to read about all the interesting stuff they did, like make sacrifices and writing in hieroglyphics. The author also uses a strong vocabulary. She uses words that I didn't know the meaning of, like sinister and clamor. When I read this book, I had to have a dictionary by me, and it really increased my vocabulary. So if you read it, it would increase your vocabulary too. And this book has a Newbery Medal Award. So I kind of thought if it's a really good book, it would be kind of sad if it was still banned, because then no one would be able to read it. It actually has multiple awards too. I also think this book sets a good example because an African American girl is getting along very well with a white girl. This shows that you could be friends no matter what race you are.
Ms. Barak, you have 1 minute for your rebuttal.
Well, in the Egypt Game, all the ceremonies that they do aren't based on real Egyptian culture. Some of them are actually almost a little bit like fudged with, I guess I could say, and not totally true. And this book is not suitable for kids because there are like other things, like a very stalker-like behavior from one character. And in 1995, 1,258 books were banned or challenged because of violence. The Egypt Game was also one of them. And in this, one person says why this book should be banned. This children's book was challenged in Richardson, Texas schools in 1995 because it shows children, in quotes, in dangerous situations, condenses trespassing and lying to parents. This can influence kids that doing all these bad things can just be a game, like trespassing into the storage yard, which isn't that safe by most parents.
Thank you, Ms. Brock. Your time is up.
Miss Anderson, you now have 1 minute for your rebuttal.
The word that was used in this book was a word that we used a while ago. The time setting of this book was a while back when this word was used more often than today. The word was a really bad word, but now people reading it know that they should not use it because of the punishment the person who said it in the book got. Other books that take place in this time period also use this word. I found that it's very common in books that take place in the past. A novel that I read last year called Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry used this word multiple times. I think that it was not a big deal that it had this word because it only used it once, unlike other books. I also think that the violence in this book was very low. It did not describe anything that happened that was violent. It was kind of just they found out that someone got murdered. It wasn't actually in detail in the book. And even if it was, other books have parts where people die, like The Hunger Games and The West Indies.
Miss Barak, you have an optional 30 seconds to conclude your thoughts.
Well, in the Egypt game, the book ends pretty happy and everyone's safe, but they do very bad things while they're doing that. And so kids will think, oh, since they ended up safe and happy and they enjoyed the game, maybe if I do those things too, that will happen too, like trespassing. And the most dangerous part of that was because their parents did not want them to talk to the professor because everyone was usually scared of him and they actually thought that he was the murderer. And so this could influence...
Miss Anderson, you have an optional 30 seconds to conclude your thoughts.
I really enjoyed this book, and I did not find really anything wrong with it. For the trespassing, the people weren't as much afraid as the professor as his store. His store had a lot of very weird antiques in it, so people were scared to enter. At the end, it turned out that the professor was actually a very nice man who also had an interest in Egyptians. He ended up becoming family friends with April and Melanie, the two main characters. I actually thought this book was one of my favorites, and it would be a shame if it were still banned.
Thank you, Miss Barak and Miss Anderson, for participating.